Good morning. I'm beyond insanely, madly excited about doing the Gosha Rubchinskiy panel. Have a fantastic set of experts. Anastasiia, if you'd like to do your intro.
Hi, my name is Anastasiia and I'm an editor of the Kelway journal. It's a London-based magazine about contemporary Russian culture, and I also write for Days Digital and 032C.
I'm Ben Kelway. I'm the art director of Arena Home Plus and Pop magazine.
I'm Stavros Karelis. I'm the founder and bank director of Machine Store.
Thank you, guys. So, apart from me being insanely excited, and I could do a 10-hour panel all by myself, I think. I think sort of a certain set of people know a lot about him, and then there's a lot of people out there who won't know so much about him. So Anastasiia, as our resident Russian, just tell me a little bit about why he's an exciting designer and this is an exciting moment for Paris.
Well, I'm incredibly excited as well because I think the first time I interviewed Gosha in 2010, in the really early stages of what he was doing, and I remember his first shows, which were set in sort of these abandoned sport halls with always boys from the street, and it was an incredibly exciting moment. And I think what he really did, he completely made a revolution in Russian visual culture, not only in fashion, just because he brought youth culture, which is really underrepresented in sort of Russian visual discourse. And he brought this kind of boys from the street, boys from the suburbs, and he channeled it all through fashion. And yeah, incredibly exciting. Not just in terms of what he's producing, but I'm incredibly interested in his visual narrative since the beginning and how it evolved till today. And he's a great photographer, and I think he's awesome. That's why I'm excited.
Ben?
Well, it was quite a long thing. What was the question again?
So I guess it'd be also interesting to talk about, he's not just a fashion designer, he's also, and as Anastasiia was saying, a photographer. I mean, I remember he did a huge 30 sort of image portfolio for me at Vice. It was just boys on the trains going out to these amazing, I guess they're council estates, I guess in communism you didn't
suburbs.
These amazing communist concrete suburbs, and I think they're called Gopniks, the kind of, is that right?
Yeah. It's not exactly chav, but it's kind of this kind of street subculture from the suburbs. Guys in tracksuits.
So what did he catch your eye as a photographer as well as a designer?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, that's probably the stuff that I saw first, and it wasn't that clear whether it was. I think what was sort of powerful about it was it wasn't that clear whether it was a documentary thing. It was quite blurred, those sort of lines, or it was a constructed thing. I mean, I think when you look into it, you start to realise that obviously, it is a constructed thing. It's for a purpose, but the casting and the location and stuff is quite powerful, and it's quite sort of charged in that respect, I suppose.
I think he does blur the lines though. So
yeah, for sure.
He went to Ukraine on a holiday and took lots of pictures, and they were all his friends, and they were casted to an extent.
But it's quite loose, that sort of, which I think is what makes it feel quite charged. I mean, it's a bit like those early sort of RAF shows. Do you know what I mean? There's a real sort of power to those things because some were models, some were friends, some were street cast, but it was very specifically chosen, and there's a kind of charge to that because he was obviously obsessed with that boy. Do you know what I mean? And I think be it a fashion thing or a photography thing, I think any artist who's making stuff with that human element, there's a real sort of charge to it. If you've got a real obsession for that character and that boy, it sort of just inherently charges the work, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And Stavros, why did Gosha catch your eye?
I think Gosha is something that is very close to the London scene. I mean, obviously he's a Russian designer, but the way of dealing with his brand and, he's heavily involved with music, he's heavily involved with filmmaking, photography. He kind of creates a whole world around his brand, and he invites all the people to visit his world and become part of it. And I think this is kind of a way of British designers, younger emerging British designers are doing it. So I think that we are based in London, and we are very familiar with that. And I think that kind of familiarity, but coming in from a completely different place, from London, it's something that was extremely exciting for me. And obviously the brand itself, I think it spoke to so many people because it's so related with youth, but also it was his pricing, everything around it was the best thing that was coming out, but was representing the Russian scene and what was going in Moscow, which was really cool.
Well, this was 100 quid.
Exactly.
You know, like,
exactly.
I remember buying it from Dover Street, and they were like, "Would you like us to hold it while you look around for more things?" And I was like, "This is the only thing I can afford." And but yeah, I mean, that it means that his boy can wear it,
exactly,
which is brilliant. I think. Well, his boy in the West can wear it, probably not so much. But I mean, I remember getting this PDF. He'd done that show in the sports hall, and I got this PDF. It was 2009, and I got this PDF through, and it was all these amazing color backdrops of a big Olympic park, I think, in Moscow, and then pictures from the sports hall, and I was looking through it, and it was, and at one point it said "Evil Empire," you know, after the famous Reagan thing about Soviet Union. And so I wrote this fashion piece, this insanely excited fashion piece. I interviewed him over Skype, and I wrote this piece, and it was the only ever fashion piece I wrote for Vice, the only ever one that the global editor of Vice was like, that's what a fashion piece should be like. I don't think he ever liked any of the others I wrote.
Well done.
But,
why was that, do you think?
It's because I said that when I read Evil Empire, I nearly came.
Fair enough.
but it was that exciting. I mean, it was like Raf and Ryan McKinley in one package.
But almost more. I mean, I can't help thinking if he was, you know, there's sort of elements in it that someone in the UK could represent those sort of groups in the UK, but something, you know, it seems exotic, I suppose, in a way, doesn't it, that it's Russian, you know what I mean? It gives it this extra layer of kind of weight. I don't know, to me, do you know what I mean?
Well, I think because everything's...
you know, like you're saying it's exotic, but...
I mean, to us, I think
yeah,
there's an element of that.
Yeah, I mean, and you're absolutely right, but I think what Gosha was different, how he was different from other Russian designers, and that he perfectly knew the language of like Western culture.
Yeah, okay,
he knew like probably like Larry Clark, and you mentioned Ryan McGinley, and he saw them, and he sort of witnessed how Western culture was coming to Russia, and he took this and he used this for his own purpose so perfectly that it kind of worked internationally so well.
Well, I remember like talking to him about some friends of mine in Russia actually, and he was like, they're so like just hipsters trying to be Western. So he had this weird dynamic.
Yeah,
and then another time I'd asked him to do a shoot, and I was like, I want the Russian council estate thing, and he'd sent this sort of skatery thing, and he got quite upset because I wanted the. So I like that. He's
an awareness.
You know, he's trying to do different things, but also he's got this relationship. I think what's exciting, obviously, about Russia is it's quite new as a free culture, and it's also so on the edge of the West. That and when I asked him who he was into, he mentioned some people that could be considered nationalist. But
Russian people. Yeah,
like a few artists and stuff. But there was also, you know, it was the good side of nationalism. Like I remember interviewing Bernard Wilhelm about Umwelt, I think, which is the idea of home.
Right.
I might have got that slightly wrong. But so it was just, you know, super exciting to.
But I think that you can see that from, I mean, like when he did his book, you know, and actually, you know, he's got like lots of references to the old history, and you know, he's really into that, looking into the future, or you know, wants like to capture just this subculture of like youth and street and skateboarding. You know, it's kind of like he always like looks into these elements from the past, from the Russian history, and wants to connect them with what he does and what he finds that is so current. I think so as well. No? Yeah.
Well, he really believes in his gang, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it's the like background which. You can't get rid of it, like, and he made the right choice of actually like using it in the right way. And like I think many, like a lot of boys and girls sort of grew up in this huge, like me myself, me as well, like till the age of 10 I lived in this on the 12th floor of this huge like high rise, surrounded by like 15 other high rises which are the same. And you don't value this image much because you saw like so mundane, but what he saw is like the great potential of it and how you can actually use it in your art, and this is quite fascinating.
Yeah, I mean that was the other thing. So not only did you have the fashion that spoke to the Raf fan, the photography that spoke to the Larry Clark, Ryan McKinley fan, but then you had those sort of things that just tick those menswear boxes, like this great concrete architecture, and then this sort of scouting-y, folky kind of brotherhood, romantic thing going on as well. It's you know, I don't know, turned me up. But he's very different. I mean, I went to Cycles and Seasons expecting to sort of see lots of other, you know, I was like, maybe I'll find lots of other Goshas. And I mean, most Russian fashion designers are just selling to sort of princesses, right?
Yeah, it's much more about women's wear rather than menswear. Like, simple example, the most known Russian women's wear designer is Uliana Sergeyenko, and like put it next to Gosha. What's it all about? It's completely different. Like, he's still very unique. I think after all those years, he's still like one of a kind.
But
I'm sorry. Yeah.
You go.
No.
I was just going to say, I mean, is there sort of starting to be a wave? Because if that happened here, you know, as we know, it's sort of fairly quickly. There's a wave of sort of similar stuff, and is that happening in Russia or not really?
There is a lot of independent young designers, and that's quite exciting. Yeah.
And more menswear.
Some menswear, lots of unisex stuff. Like they try to sort of, I don't know, I think they try to get as much sort of potential buyers as possible, so they do like unisex stuff for girls and for boys. Yeah. But I can't name like sort of a predecessor for him yet.
I can name. I mean, like not someone that he does it exactly as Gosha did it, because obviously Gosha is doing it for quite a lot of time. But a new designer that is coming out is Tigran. You know, so he's Tigran. You know, he's a Russian designer. He's exactly doing this kind of like youth. He's very involved with youth culture, street culture, but in a very similar but also a very different way from Gosha. And he studied in Celis and Martins. He graduated from Celis and Martins, but he lives in Moscow. I think he's one of the most exciting designers, emerging designers right now, and I think he's doing like extremely well. You know, like he graduated a year ago, and already he has like lots of stockies worldwide. You know, people are paying attention to him. I think he's one of like really exciting Russian designers that he's coming out as well. So it kind of like, it seems slowly there might be a movement that is happening with young emerging brands. And I was invited by British Fashion Council in Russia, kind of like about 2 or 3 years ago, to check about emerging brands and, you know, see what's going on. And I come with you, you know, there are not like so many brands that they're kind of doing this, you know, there are not so many, but I think that for them, in order to do it, I think they have like to keep everything in Moscow and then move and go like to abroad and kind of experience what's happening, you know, through schools or through universities, and then go back and do their own thing and represent the Russian culture. Yeah.
Well, I think as well, it's interesting because did he train to be a designer?
Gosha? I don't think so.
Did he study though? We don't know.
I don't know.
I don't remember for sure, but that he didn't. But I might be wrong.
I think his moment where he'd done a couple of collections, and then he had that moment before Com kind of backed him, before Adrian Joff and the Com that backed him for his production. He had that moment where he was like, I'm just going to be a photographer. And I think that shows, like, you know, I'm really interested as well in how he's one of this new wave of designers who really, are they an artist, are they a designer? And you know, I mean, obviously clothes make such great art, like, you know, and so many designers deny because they don't want to embarrass themselves that they're an artist. But
yeah,
so, you know, he was hanging out with those guys and making that photography because that's what he really believed in.
Yeah, there must have been a point where it was like, you know, is it about the photos or is it about the clothes? Does the clothes make the photos better? Do you know what I mean? I mean, that's quite interesting. That's what I was going to ask, actually, because I sort of, you know, I didn't know, did he study here? What was, you know, was there a point when he had those sort of ideas and then came here to study and that translated it into a collection?
He was only studied in Moscow, right?
Yeah, I don't think he studied it.
No, right.
Because his English was pretty, it was quite hard, had to interview him with a translator.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's quite interesting. I mean, it's also, I don't know, I mean, somehow it's very appealing that he's still there, do you know what I mean? Somehow if he'd, you know, done the shows and then, you know, he's doing this show and then sort of relocated, I don't know, I think it's probably, you know, I don't know, I guess it helps his credibility and certainly makes it seem more the real deal to sort of keep working in that kind of context, I suppose, isn't it?
And he had that amazing blog, didn't he, Aglek?
Yeah.
What does Aglek mean?
Actually, in Russian is aglet, but it doesn't like translate properly through his like English abbreviation. And I think it was a combination of two words. One of which was a lamp and kind of biblical version of lamp, and another was like kind of a rude boy. So he merged these two words. It's like pun, but Russian
what, lamp, pun.
like biblical kind of
like light
like a
or
genie
lamp, like, you know, Christ.
Okay, so
Yeah.
rude boy, Christ, rude boy.
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
sort of it was this kind of
Wow.
play on words, and it was, yeah.
Well, I never saw it, what was on it?
It was just
Like-
this amazing, like it was just full of his photography and just, you know, and also he's a bit of an art director, right?
Right,
So
yeah.
it's just full of incredible images. It's no longer online, and you know, he did the thing with 032C, didn't he? So it would have like
Okay, yeah,
his
right.
supplement for them, and I mean, it's just like every time you looked at it, you were just like, this is beautiful.
Yeah.
So shall we look at the show?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So straight away, kind of shockingly different to what we've seen in the past. Lotta Volkova, Adam is styling, one of my favourite people in the world.
I think that kind of like he started kind of changing a bit not his direction, but kind of like his clothes and the shapes a bit and the styling since his last season. But you can still see like quite a lot of Gosha there. I mean, like the colors and the jumpers. This is really amazing, all the yellows and the brown and white.
Well, it's quite strange when he
Yeah.
did those like sort of furry crop tops
Yeah.
a sort of season or two back.
He's got hoodies.
Yeah, it was quite weird actually what you mentioned, this fur kind of stuff, because I think it was his last collection when we looked at it in the office, like me and some of like my Russian friends, and they were like, is it good, is it bad? We can't really get it. Don't we get it because it's cool, or is it because I think it didn't quite speak to us how his previous stuff spoke
I mean,
to
this
us.
this is more kind of
Gosha.
his, I mean,
Yeah.
like even the denim gilet, it makes sense. It's the kind of,
His shapes.
You sort of read it instantly as a version of that real boy, I suppose, as well. I mean, a couple of the pieces at the start, you know, easily blur into a sort of, I don't know, you know, almost like a Prada-ish boy or something. But you know what I mean? There's definitely more of a street thing here, isn't there? It's quite, the running order's quite interesting, isn't it? It's quite sort of choppy.
well, I guess I guess they wanted to slap everybody around the face with the first few looks as well.
But I also think that because obviously I'm guessing that Com is still backing his shows and everything. So, and obviously Gosha right now has gained lots of stockies worldwide, and you know he's got lots of department stores and lots of places that obviously they want kind of like a bit of more, perhaps more variety of his stuff. So the first kind of like looks might be appealing or might be requests from other stores, and they'll be like, oh, we want to see a bit more of other things. So that's why he shows something. It might be what you said, you know, he might want just to give them a slap. And
No, but you're right, and I think obviously it is
a brand after all, So
and it's quite hard, right, to sell it to probably most people. You know, it's generally you see it on very young, early 20-something people. So it's probably this is helping to sell it up a bit.
But also, you know, not to lose your brand identity, because all the followers of Gosha they're following him because of the style of the style that he has established all these years. So kind of like it's kind of always the big challenge for designers, how they're moving to the next level, how they're moving their collections to the next level without losing the brand identity. And I think he hasn't lost it. I mean, this is all Gosha, you know. So he obviously has to introduce some new styles every season and see what is the feedback, how people react to it, and he has to play with these kind of things. But actually, this is a beautiful collection. The colors, the palettes, the shapes. It's beautiful. It's really
I love
nice.
the alien.
Yeah. He likes rave.
There's not that much sort of graphics, I suppose, as there was in some of the previous stuff.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, we've seen most of it, haven't we? I mean, the casting's quite interesting. Do you think it's sort of partly street cast? Because I don't recognise many of these boys, do you? In terms of,
I
like, you know,
recognize
show
like
boys.
2 or 3
There's a couple,
from
isn't there?
his previous
Oh, right, yeah, do you
like
think
books and
A
stuff.
lot of there might be like Russians, and tends to cast from not just from Paris. She'll cast from all over Europe, and
You think they
especially
brought
like
people?
the blonde kind of belt of Europe.
Yeah.
You know, the Baltic, anything around the Baltic, and the kind of
Latvian and stuff.
yeah.
Are these Vans, the shoes? He has
did a
collaborated,
collab with Vans, right?
So he might continue actually because
red.
of this, yeah.
That red tracksuit's
Yeah.
really amazing.
Yeah.
Cool.
Altamont was the top
yeah.
that I had. That was another collaboration. He's done a few collaborations, which I think is always. But Vans is a great collaboration, really.
Well, it makes
I think
sense,
for
doesn't
him.
it? What are these shoes with the laces, with the sort of bowling kind of front? Can't really see what they are.
I'm loving that red tracksuit though. Oh, it's not an all-in-one, is it? It's hard.
Yeah,
to
it's
see.
2 pieces, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, also this colour here, Anastasiia, this feels to me very Moscow, and also Kiev Fashion Week. Very that
it
kind
is
of.
indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, this kind of like really bright. I mean, red is kind of traditionally a really Russian color, so I think it was a nod to that.
Oh no, I mean
brown.
24.
You know, you see, like to me, red feels like much more Russian
okay.
than that. But yeah, and I feel to me like leather feels quite Russian because it's sort of
Yeah.
these baggy leather jackets from the
Yeah,
90s.
completely,
Yeah,
Yeah, there was one look quite early on which felt just...
number 4.
Yeah, I
obviously.
mean, it sort of very much felt like that.
Well, I think it's quite funny as well because to me, when you look at, have you seen that website English Russia?
No.
So English Russia is like a website written in English, and it's got everything weird about the Soviet Union.
Oh, yeah.
And it had, what was the law? Was it the 412 law? You know, the kids were all wearing the drug code. You know, it has like stories like that. I can't remember if it was 412 or... So they were all the kids were getting sportswear printed with this code on, which was the chapter in Russian law that bans cannabis.
Right, okay.
And it just has lots of stories about that. And so much of the imagery around Russia until very recently, until maybe the last 4 or 5 years, looked very 90s anyway.
Yeah.
And looked like that European 90s,
so
that kind of a fantasy space of the 90s almost.
I was going to ask actually, you know, because when he does those sort of soundtracks and puts those, you know, music stuff together, I mean, what was that music, you know, current at the time in Russia? Do you know what I mean? When he's doing all those sort of mixes of Prodigy and Adonis and all that kind of stuff, you know, that 90s sort of, I mean, was rave music, were those sort of big records at the time, or is it
Yeah,
now
definitely.
that they're being played? I don't know.
Yeah, I think definitely Russia had this like big rave.
Yeah.
So
Way.
there's not a delay
Yeah.
on it. I don't know, just interested, 'cause, you know, that I was reading that guy that he did it with, there was obviously...
Nikita.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nikita.
He's
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
probably too young to have even, I don't know, probably wasn't born when those things came
Yeah,
out.
he definitely was.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if, you know, if that thing actually existed at the time, or is it a thing that's happening now, or, you know, I mean, obviously it very much fits in his world, but I don't know.
Well,
Yeah.
I think
I think it definitely existed, but you know how in the fashion world and the art world is also about recycling the ideas and coming back to something, making a collage of it. So I think it's a bit of both.
It's probably a bit analogous to like how now if you go to like any art, like super art, cool art party, then everybody's playing grime. And it's like it's a bit the same thing. Like it's, I think, because in Europe anyway, that whole trance thing was always a bit bigger because there wasn't the opposing musical style.
It was. You know, I'm from Greece, so you know, like in in '90s it was all about rave and Prodigy and everything. You know, it was massive.
It's funny. I mean, I guess even if you sort of know quite a lot about music, I always found in other countries, musical history is just such a different sort of thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or things of different kind of importance or interpretation. I always thought it's quite funny how like all that sort of goth stuff's really big in like Italy and stuff like that. If you go to Italy and they always really like, I don't know, Depeche Mode and all the Cure, and you sort of I was always surprised that all those sort of dark things had any kind of relevance in. And I guess again it seems exotic, I suppose.
But I think also what's interesting, perhaps with Russia and Anastasiia, I don't know. I mean, maybe this to some extent is different, but it actually to me seems like it calls on the same thing. Is that a few Russians have told me that because of in Soviet times there wasn't anything to do, so there wasn't nightclubs as such.
Yeah, right.
That being intellectual was much more what you did, because you had to sit around talking about books and so I feel like here somewhere there's a weird connection between trance and depth. I don't know, like Russians have this weird kind of there's much more intellectualism nearer the culture than perhaps in the West.
Yeah, probably. I think you're right. But it's quite hard to say like 100%. So Russia is generally quite a weird place. It was and it still is in terms of, like you said, that there was no nightclubs before the 90s. So exactly, imagine all this growing from like 0.0 to like in a completely weird, bizarre way, like taking something from the West, like something authentic appears and then it all mixes together. So
well, like the best fashion pictures of the 80s you've ever seen are those, do you remember the Soviet punk exhibition?
Oh yeah.
I mean, just like the strongest, most amazing, and it was very definitely in that Depeche Mode kind of.
Yeah, Depeche Mode is massive in Eastern Europe. Completely,
It's funny.
They're kind of still touring or something.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I want that red tracksuit for sure.
But I can imagine, like, him to be in a car actually and driving, or like young Russian guys, being in a car and driving around and have like this music and listening to it, and then getting inspired, and not like being actually in a club dancing or like I kind of like this is kind of like more the world that I imagine it.
Actually, funny enough, I had a look around last night, and he was sort of talking about those mixtapes that he'd done for that last collection, and then people saying, where's the best place to hear this music, or what's the best, and he said, it's all about driving around, it's about the car, and driving around and having that visual is not really about dancing even,
right.
You know what I mean? And it was sort of a soundtrack to that environment rather than a kind of euphoric sort of communal party. It was almost quite sort of solo in a way for him.
Well, he's doing a club night on Saturday night, and the
in
picture,
Paris.
And it's, I literally would like to just go just for the party, and it's a picture of a load of lads just drinking, of a typical Gopnik kind of drink kind of thing, and I think that's.
Actually, I remembered just now that I've seen Gosha DJ in Kiev about like I think 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, and he was just playing like anything he wants. He's like playing some like techno track, and then he mixing some really techy like 90s pop songs, Russian 90s pop songs. So he's kind of about this pushing the boundaries in any way. Like he is not afraid to assault some people or to seem like inappropriate, and it was really, really fun.
Can I ask you something? How is the reactions of the people living in Moscow for Gosha? Because obviously we all in Europe and love Gosha. Like all my friends love wearing Gosha. But how is actually the people living in Moscow react to the brand itself?
It's like Moscow is always about kind of two groups. It's kind of your community you live in, and you kind of like people who create contemporary Moscow culture is like, I don't know, 300 people, 400 people, no more than that, and the rest is sort of other 10 million or whatever, like 12 million. So people in this cultural circle, they obviously love Gosha, and some of them have known him for years since he's like started or before he started. So it's kind of like you're in a group of friends, you always appreciate it. But other people, I mean, I can't really say, because in Russia you always have this division of like sort of your little circle and other people.
Well, I found it very difficult because when I was there, you know, I was like trying to work out where to go. And I loved Solyanka for what it looked like. Everybody looked incredibly cool. But I guessed at the price of a pint that the genuinely cool people weren't there.
Oh gosh, yes.
You know, and I was desperate to sort of find out, well, where do the poor artists live and where do they go and what do they, because there must be a whole section of people who aren't, who are just like, you know, making music in their bedroom and obviously nobody was going to tell me. I mean, we were being chauffeur driven in Range Rovers with TV screens, so nobody was going to tell me where that was. Because I kept trying to find out, is there a Peckham in Moscow? And you know.
Yeah, but no, Moscow is a lot about, for an artist or musician, it's about writing music in your bedroom and hanging out outside Solyanka, not inside it. You know? Sort of this kind of our version of the underground is on the verge of this sort of.
Because I did have very romantic ideas about what Moscow would be like.
I mean, probably there is. I mean, I haven't been in Moscow for a while, so probably I just don't know anymore. There might be.
But it's interesting. I mean, I think that's interesting because I suppose it's really interesting that he went outside of that world and got this disallowed world, because in British culture a lot of that's enabled by the fact that, you know, it's not that hard for somebody from a council, it's not impossible for the two worlds to meet, whereas in Moscow it's probably very difficult for the two worlds to meet. And so I guess it's extra revolutionary that he's projecting it. Maybe, I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, it's also not easy to make it outside of Russia. For instance, for Russian artist, designer, musician, because you need to do like produce quality, like sort of.
Well, I guess
Western
he needs
quality.
to translate or he needs to speak. You know, I mean, you know, it's interesting actually that he's aware of that. You know, I mean, it's not surprising, I suppose, that he's aware of that. You know, Larry Clark or Ryan McGinley's sort of language, I suppose, because I don't know, I guess ideally when you first see it you sort of hope that it's this kind of thing that's made in this vacuum and that doesn't know, and it just happens to sort of tap into that. But, you know, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, not that he used it or, you know, used it specifically to get exposure, but I mean, you know, it makes sense that he looked at that stuff and thought, actually, you know, without trying to look like American, I can make a Russian version of this.
Well, I think he's very keen on doing something Russian.
Yeah, you know, and he stayed there. It's not like he's moved to New York to take pictures of skateboarders, do you know what I mean? It's like, you know, he obviously wants to keep it, and, you know, that boy is so specifically that thing. It doesn't look, you know, I think a lot of people would try and make it look like New York hipsterish kind of characters, but, you know,
and the weirdness of a lot of these silhouettes.
Well, some of them are so random, that's what I mean, it's chopping and changing, you know, suddenly it's changes, doesn't it?
Oh no! I just want to say before, you know, that I think also, you know, it's extremely difficult thing to have a brand in and be based in Russia. You know, it's an extremely difficult thing. I mean, there are like so many parameters that it doesn't make it easy for them to export the goods and to show the collections, you know, to a bigger audience, you know, in Europe or, you know, US. Asia, so it's extremely difficult. Kind of like the rules that they apply are very, very different from what applies in Europe. So I think that is it's I think one extra factor why some things are very different between Russian designers, and because I'm guessing and I'm sure, as exists here in London, there must be so many young artists or designers that they want to do something similar like this. But how easy is that? I'm guessing it must be extremely difficult, because even with designers that they know what they're doing, still they find themselves extremely difficult to make a collection, showcase it, show it, to send it outside from to different countries, and and I'm guessing that there must be like so many people there that they would like to do this, and they've got like all these great ideas, but it's a matter of how they can do it.
I think that's interesting when you say there must be so many people, because I think it's quite a special person that sees the connection between this kind of soulfulness and fashion.
No, I didn't mean that there are so many people that would do the same thing as Gosha. I say that there must be so many people. Yeah, so smaller designers that they can do something very different from Gosha, as we have, how is London? We've got our scene of designers, and all of them, they do something very different between them. But you see them, like you see from Nazir to Christopher Shannon to everyone, Craig Green, all of them, they're British designers. They grew up, in London. Everyone has like completely like different feedbacks or memories or music. They want their shows are completely different, but they are able to do this and show it. I don't know like how many, and I'm sure, I'm guessing there must be like so many interesting designers there, but it could be very difficult to do something like that because it's not that organized, perhaps, or
it is indeed very difficult. Like if you think Russian fashion industry is like 20-something years old, so undeveloped, really hard to produce in Russia, really hard to like import, export, buy materials, and even beyond that, like education is not great. Like it's only now starting to sort of go up to the level of.
What do you mean education? Full stop, or education of actually
fashion,
vocational?
Like fashion education.
So how to actually apply it to.
It's really really old-fashioned still. It's kind of like from the Soviet time, and we don't have proper fashion week. We don't have like supporting structures who would give you some funding. It's really hard. You need to like find a sponsor, and there's no system for that, and. Even you don't get that much media attention. Like here, you get into London Fashion Week, you get like even sort of doing a small presentation, you get a lot of media attention.
I think you've got like two different fashion weeks, right? But this is what I found like very strange when I was there, because there is one that is Russian Fashion Week, and then there's another one that is called, I think, Moscow Fashion Week, something like that. So there were like two things happening. Like
there's also cycles and seasons, which
I think they don't exist
goes
anymore today.
Sorry?
I don't think they don't exist anymore.
They don't exist anymore.
I mean, at some point there were 4 fashion weeks in Moscow. It's mental because it's mostly.
What's the differentiation?
It's like people just sort of struggling for sponsorships and trying to pull sponsors from one to another and pull designers from one to another. So, like, who needs 4 fashion weeks? It's insane.
And St. Petersburg had one as well. One as well.
Yeah, it does. Actually, St. Petersburg one is quite interesting. Aurora Fashion Week. Because it's a lot about independence and Petersburg designers, and it's really nice scene there.
More so than Moscow?
I think, I don't know, I can't really compare, but there is definitely a separate scene there.
People say St. Petersburg is a little bit more indie because it's a bit less money around. And
quite more laid back, and sort of historically supposed to be like more cultural than Moscow. So, and I think it's easier to survive for an artist there because you don't need as huge money to pay rents. You kind of can survive on whatever, like on and off.
And also I think that Gosha he's a brilliant designer, and he studied doing and get involved and showcasing like this kind of like street skateboard thing, get involved with that in a very early stage. It wasn't a trend for him, it wasn't like he followed the trend, he sort of like he was one of the first ones to create that trend, and people are getting like more and more involved into it. And I think this is also, and also obviously I'm guessing that it definitely helped him, the connection that he had with Comme des Garçons, and also the platform that he had through Dover Street. In the beginning, I mean, that is a really big platform, and that's kind of like a really big push out there. I mean, he's extremely talented person, but also, having that on the back perhaps like allowed him to go and explore further other like photography and other things, and because perhaps he had the assistance of Com. Saying,
I think it's beautiful the way, I mean, Ray and Adrian, between them have promoted so many people over the years.
I agree.
And it's just like so many, you see so many creatives that don't want to bring up other people behind them, and it's like the best way to stay relevant is to know what's going on and have the future around you, and I just don't understand how people don't see that's logical.
I completely agree with you. You know, I mean, this is what we lots of times discuss here, and you know, Show Studio and everyone, you know, involved in Show Studio. And Show Studio is doing that. You know, he supports a lot of emerging brands. You know, we try to do it as well with the store, and you know, it's extremely important because all these people are going to become the future of fashion in one point. You know, when Gosha started, now he's one of the main brands that we talk about. But when he first started, whoever is going to get involved is already part of it. You know, so it's very special. And you know, I think more and more people should focus on that and should try and help, especially people with means and money and power, should try and back up designers.
It just makes things more interesting. I wondered as well if you know, you work with Igor, who is the editor of Hooligan magazine, which was a great Russian magazine, and I wondered, I guess as well, there's a sort of lack of those kind of platforms for young fashion.
Yeah, well, a lot of them are online these days. I think Russians are really more into online these days. There are still zines and like self-publishing things, but we have quite a lot of like good magazines out there, quite with massive audience. Like, Look at Me, One Zine, all these ones.
Is Look at Me still going?
Yeah, and I mean they expanded massively. They're kind of media holding now. You know.
Wow.
They started from like street style, taking pictures of people on the street, and now they own like 4 websites, and it's massive. Like the quality of content, like sometimes doubtful, but. Indeed, it's great to see it sort of growing.
That's interesting. Okay, so we have a question here, a celebrity question from Mr. Callum Knight, which I think is very appropriate given how much Gosha cares about youth culture, etc. He's also buying consultant for Show Studio. And he's going to be buying from this collection for which you'll be able to buy at Show Studio. Mm-hmm. So how do you go from having a cult following to the mainstream without losing that cult following or feeling? That's a brilliant question, I think. One that we can chew on.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Mr. Retail.
Excellent question. It's coming from a person that actually understands how difficult is that. I think this is the biggest challenge that every brand is facing. It's and I think that lots of British brands are facing right now, and all the emerging brands mainly are facing, because what happens is you begin and then you start having like this really strong following, but you know it's small. It's the cool crowd that loves you, wants to wear your clothes, everything, and then all of a sudden the press attention. All the stores want to stock you, and you have to move your brand to the next level. And how you, it's not about, because lots of people think, it's about making your brand more commercial. It's not about making your brand more commercial. It's about how you move to the next level, because you have to grow your collection. You have to show more styles. You have to show your potential as well, because you cannot show every season kind of like the same thing. You have to show to people that this is what I can do. And
do you have to grow?
You have to grow because if you keep doing the same thing again season after season after season, you're not going to be able to go anywhere. I mean,
doesn't growth become a trap when you have to employ people and then you end up designing to keep people in jobs? And
that's the challenge. That's the challenge exactly. Like about how that you have to grow very slow and very safe, and you have to grow while your sales are growing, and while you have like the business structure to support that kind of growth. Because most of the brands, this is where kind of like sometimes they crash, because they don't know how to translate this success that is happening to them and take it on board and do everything on the right way and go to the next level. But I think that people that they've got like a very strong vision, you know, like Gosha, like lots of British designers as well, you know, they've got a very, very strong vision in their mind. They can not lose it, you know. They can.
But could you not be?
They can, yeah.
I'm just playing with you here
please,
a bit.
Completely.
But you know, like maybe Judy Blame, you know, he doesn't have a massive organisation. He works at the top of the industry, but he gets the freedom, you know. Or maybe Larry Clark is a good example. Or maybe, you know, because I mean, I'm all for expansion, but also I'm guessing that, you know, Gosha must have, you know, he already stopped his line once, you know. Raf obviously, you know, he stopped his line and then decided, right, I'm going to make this massive and take over the world and be a brilliant Dior designer. But maybe there's people like, maybe Christopher Nemeth was another one, you know, somebody who has managed to be a fashion legend but do what he wants.
I guess it depends what you mean by growth, really, doesn't it? You know, I mean, there's sort of, you know, not just in fashion, but anything creatively, people evolve and become a legend or a big thing, whatever you want to call it, or you grow as a company and become a commercial success. But I think anything has to grow, you know, in terms of evolving, you know.
You have to evolve.
Yeah, you have to evolve, otherwise, you know, without naming any names in any line, you know, that thing just doesn't date well, do you know what I mean? And there's an awareness, and also I think the stuff that grows well and people who evolve well often get to a point where they want to go, actually, you know what, I want to show people that I can actually, you know, compete on a sort of big level and work, whether it's commercially or just, I don't know, you know, a level of polish or finish.
But that also ends up turning everybody into a manager, not an artist.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's in terms of commercial, yeah, you become, you know, it's a company and there's logistics, and especially, you know, in something like fashion wear, there's a specific calendar and there's, you know, deliveries and deadlines.
Exactly. I mean, like, the industry has changed dramatically. You know, like, I mean, what everyone expects from these designers right now, it's crazy. I mean, if you put it down about what a designer should do with the budgets that they've got in their hands, you know, it's absolutely crazy. You know, if you think about it, they have like to produce fashion, obviously the collections, and then fashion shows, and then the PR, and then the press, and then the sales, and then they have to travel to Paris, and then they have to go to London, and they have to go to New York, and then they have to go to Milan. It's all of this, and this is just one season that we're talking about, and then they finish from the sales and they're coming back and they have to start the productions, and then they have to go to the factories and they say, I've got these kind of minimums, and the factory is probably going to tell them, we cannot take your collection in because we have another brand which they have like 10,000 more pieces from you and items and units, so we're going to take them first and we're going to delay you, which means that they start losing the deadlines with the retailers. So the retailers can go back to them and say, okay, now because you didn't bring the collection on time, we're going to have it on sell or return, so we're not going to pay you, and if you sell, then, you know, we're going to give you money back, or otherwise you have lost your money. There you are. You know, it's a circle of, it's an extremely difficult thing to do by yourself with very certain means.
No, I think
so.
I think you're right. And selfishly, I was upset when Gosha stopped designing and wanted him to carry on.
Yeah.
But I wonder. I mean, you know, I don't want to challenge him. I think he's a brilliant designer. But I do also wonder. You know, you two with your more kind of art photography background. I mean, he's a brilliant photographer. Yeah. Could he not make lots of money being a photographer?
I mean, I'd love it if he was someone who, I don't know, didn't even show on season, but just did a collection, sometimes did a book one year, did a film or whatever, disappeared for a year. I mean, that kind of thing is very appealing and charming. You know, I mean, when that collection or whatever, you know, if he does fashion again after a hiatus or whatever, you know, there's so much sort of goodwill for that thing, and it does keep it fresh. But it depends. I mean, you know, does he want to be Raf, or does he want to be?
Just like decision he made, obviously here, is like doing a proper show.
Yeah, I mean, this is quite
like if you think of what it came from, like from doing like 10 sweatshirts with Empire of Evil stitched in them, and then coming from there to here, it's quite actually fascinating. And the collection in itself is like, it's really interesting. It's really interesting to look at, and sort of these ideas evolving, and I don't know, I just hope that he doesn't lose this vision which he started with.
There's obviously a lot more to him than
Yeah.
just street culture. He's obviously got a really interesting fashion, and it's really exciting for Paris to have this show shaking it up. And if there was a Gosha sports sock, I'd buy it. But I guess on a sort of bigger level, I just worry that we push so many people that they have to become a business. And you know, it's like Jay-Z singing that I'm Picasso. It's like, well, no, you're not. You're a sports agent. You know, you're not an artist because you've chosen not to be an artist. You've chosen to be a sports agent.
Yeah.
And then that kind of idea of you know, that just that thing of that we all have to become managers rather than creatives.
I think there's a lot of pressure probably, you know. I wonder if someone like Judy, if they started now, you know, would it become a big thing? Do you know what I mean? If it was done in the same way, I don't think it would, because, you know, it's almost a bit like, can you say you're a fashion designer if you don't do a show twice a year? Do you know what I mean? You sort of can't, which is kind of terrible, I suppose. But there's a very, unless you're like a liar, there's a sort of quite a definite structure, which means that is your job or it's not. Do you know what I mean? That you have to adhere to.
And it's definitely good for fashion that he is a fashion designer, because
yeah,
some of those pieces, that like that black leather jacket that's very wrong, but like, or the denim, you know, it's going to be really good to see that weird presence.
Yeah.
Also, I think that, you know, a designer, I mean, for example, you know, if you take like the Ralph example, that because we're talking about, oh, he's going to lose his vision, you know, after like 4 or 5 years time. Ralph didn't lose his vision, you know, like because he had such a strong vision, you know, since the beginning. He might stopped his collection for a while. He might went in some other places. He might redone the brand. He went to Dior, but it's Ralph in the end of the day, and you know, and he's very, very strong, and everyone recognize who is Ralph and which piece is Ralph. I think the same thing is going to happen to Gosha, and I think the same thing is going to happen to every designer, that they have a very strong vision, and they will never compromise the vision, you know. So and also, if Gosha is going to become extremely successful, which I think he will, you know, in 10 years time, and maybe he has to run a massive fashion house, the pressure is going to be really massive as well onto him. So all this exercise, all these years are going to help him to take this job when it's going to be time.
I mean, I guess, you know, I mean, it excites me, the idea of millions of people wearing this excites me, but I guess also it's nice that Walter van Beirendonck doesn't really make commercial pieces, but he's still massively, you know, respected, that he's not making the shirt that just needs to be sold in the shop.
You can see already that this, I mean, it's quite accessible in a way, a lot of the stuff, do you know what I mean? Even compared to like, I don't know, Bernard Wilhelm or something like that, it's not like, you know, my mum wouldn't look at this and go,
what have you got on?
Yeah, do you know what I mean? It's pretty...
it's very accessible. Gosha's always been accessible.
Like
and price-wise as well. I think that would be my kind of like biggest challenge for him. You know, it wouldn't be if he would lose his vision, it would be if he's going to lose his pricing. You know, that would be like a question perhaps, you know, to ask, if, you know, it's going to become so successful that he has to compromise his price points, which was exactly what made him so popular, and also people to be able to buy his clothes. So and I mean by people, the young people, that they love his brand. So that would be perhaps even a bigger challenge than losing his vision. Would be like if he has to change his prices slowly, so he can be able to make bigger and bigger collections, so using more and more fabrics. Luxury fabrics.
Anastasiia, you've been quiet. How do you think this fits in? I guess we probably should close soon anyway. So how do you think this should fit? How do you think this fits in the history of Gosha, and what are your thoughts on the collection? And
I don't know. I just see it. I really like it personally, and I see it as a great development of him as a designer, as an artist, because I think the previous collection, when I looked at it, I couldn't really make up my mind what do I think of it, what direction he's taken. But looking at this, like, sort of a real mixture. Like you see these first 3 looks and you can't really figure out what's about, but as you look through everything, you sort of see that it's still him.
Can we scroll through a bit, just while we're talking, if that's okay, please?
Yeah, sort of you see that it's still him and still has the spirit, and you see things that he would like to wear, and I think it's great. If that's the kind of the path he's chosen, then it seems to work for him.
Yeah, I mean, he is challenging, right? In the last few collections, there are always quite sort of challenging pieces and sometimes challenging imagery. And even as a massive fan, I'm not always like instantly liking stuff, but then that's, that's why I'm not a designer and he is.
No, the designer has to like sort of challenge the audience. You always have to like give people what they instantly don't like. It's kind of
and these sorts are very him. It's somehow, we were looking at D² yesterday, and somehow this is nowhere near it. Yet the colours are just as bright. Some of them. Mr. Kelway, what are your closing thoughts?
I mean, I think it's nice. I think I was hoping slightly that it would be somehow sort of darker or more heavy in some way. I don't know why I sort of felt like it might go that way. But it's very him, and there's a lightness to it, and there's a kind of, there's a funness. There's a few sort of looks in there which have got a sort of toughness and a little bit sort of scarier somehow, which I really like. And I'd quite like, I don't know, I guess it's that sort of...
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. Even looking back and thinking, did I see that one before? That's what I was saying before. It's quite... I'd be interested to see it... I don't know, grow up a bit, I suppose, which I dare say it will.
Well, I guess it is in front of us in some ways.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly is from before, and I'd be interested to see how it goes. I think it's really good that he's kept that casting. I was sort of half, wondering if they might just use a load of sort of everyone else's Paris sort of boys in it. But, I think that, in terms of someone maintaining that thing from cult to whatever, like Raf, that's what's going to keep it, that compulsion to have that boy, which seems to be doing.
Yes. Yeah, that cult, yeah. I think, did we answer that question properly? The cult thing?
I don't know.
You did a very brilliant answer. No, you did a good answer.
I think that's what, he's obviously got a compulsion to make, clothes or pictures or document that boy, and I think that compulsion will keep that vision sort of pure to a degree, regardless of growth and commerce and blah blah blah.
Well, I think there's also a cult of as much as there's a lot of misunderstanding between Russia and the West at the moment, I think part of it is also just an attraction to Russia, an attraction, and part of that. So whatever he does, there'll be a certain this is the strongest, most brilliant voice we've had from Russia, probably in any of the visual arts. And I think people will want to buy into that because Russia has all this wonderful cultural history and this wonderful history of modernism, and that's exciting for people. I don't know, it's exciting for me. I remember when we used to play war in the playground. I always wanted to be a MiG, not a F-16. It's
Yeah, Russia does have this energy attached to it, kind of anything, when you call it Russian, it becomes more
It's got again a heavy, kind of, serious, bit scary nature to it, I think.
Yeah.
And I think, like you say, there's a very much a sort of welcome kind of audience for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really good that opposed what we hear and see in the news, what's happening to Russia now, and all this, like, how it's moving towards conservatism and so on. It's really nice to see that as well, that actually Russian designers, Russian artists are able to produce something which is interesting, which is youthful, which is like
for sure.
So good. So
Well, I mean, adversity always makes some good art sometimes as well. Stavros, closing comments?
No, I think it was, I think it was a great collection, and I think, you can see his vision there, and he's developing exactly like to the next level. It's also a spring-summer collection, which, always is kind of like a bigger challenge to show exactly like the kind of like the strongest feeling, you know, out of the two collections. Usually the autumn winter collections are the ones that are usually more heavy, you know, like in references, because with the spring summer collections you cannot do like so much heavy referencing. And I think he did a brilliant job. I think that his stockists and his followers are going to be extremely happy, and he's definitely moving to the right direction. Yeah.
Well, so anybody that does too much sort of logos and sportswear right now will get crucified, won't they? So,
exactly.
So it's interesting that he's doing, you know, playing with different forms of coats, playing with different shapes, and but it's still in the casual thing. I guess one of the points, just because, you know, you're Russian and art and fashion, I guess one of the things that I find also attractive about Russia is not just the history, but the culture's asking all the, because it's in the crisis almost, is asking all the questions on a big, broad thing that that everybody in European cultures are asking. You know, it feels like, but Russia's asking them on a big level, like, you know, what's the future? Like, you know, what are we gonna do? Like, and I think that's interesting, you know, to for a fashion label and for sort of identity and stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think you summed up Russian culture pretty well. It's all about like these big questions, what to do, what kind of, where is it going, and so on. And I think Gosha is a good example of bringing this couple some like not such a typical form, and it's interesting to see that and how it's happening.
And it's interesting that he's sort of moving to this space between the sportswear and the suit, that I don't know that there's enough designers sitting in that space right now. It seems like people are throwing themselves in to one or the mega lux or tracksuit, one or the other.
I think that the people that they studied the streetwear, sportswear kind of trend, massive trend right now. I think they slowly try. We really are. We love like streetwear, we love sportswear, but we're going to move ourselves out of the trend that everyone right now goes into, because they don't want like to relate themselves with all the rest of the people that it's not real. It's not real for them. They're just doing it because of a trend situation. So the trend centers like Gosha and like lots of other people, you know, want like just, you know, to kind of, you know, move to the next level and be like, we're always going to be that because this is who we are, but we can do and we can play everywhere we want to.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you very, very, very much, guys.
Thank you.
It's very interesting. Thank you.